Designing a show garden for Chelsea, you'll have a very different brief than when you're designing a garden for clients. But designing my own garden, I can make up my own brief. And my brief for this garden is fourfold. Number one, it has to be a family garden. We all live in it, enjoy it, and the children played in it when they were smaller. It's basically for living in. Number two, it has to be low maintenance. I only have 1 day a week to maintain it, and Dave helps me 1 day a week. So it has to look good on that small amount of maintenance for when clients come round. Number three, I love experimenting with it. I like trying out different plants. I like trying different techniques for stonework, raised beds or whatever. So it really is an experimental station almost. Number four, most importantly though, is self-sufficiency. This garden is now pretty much almost all self-sufficient. So it really has to be a very hard-working but enjoyable garden. This is a courtyard garden, and it's an important garden because it's the first garden that you see, the first proper garden that you see when you arrive at the property. It's surrounded on most sides by a building, and so you look at it 365 days a year. So it's got a lot of structural planting in because it has to look good all the time. All the box hedging and the yew hedging I did from cuttings, and the quince trees which enclosed the courtyard went in really quite small. But it doesn't take long when you grow plants yourself, and it's really satisfactory when you know they're your own babies. So this courtyard is really part of the big courtyard. When we arrived, there was really nothing in the courtyard at all. I liked the fact that it was one huge courtyard, but there again, I wanted a bit of privacy, so I semi-divided it with the yew hedge and the stone piers. And the outer area is much more agricultural. I haven't put in lots of ornamental planting. I wanted it to be simple because I do love that agricultural feel of the property. So that's just got the 4 evergreen oaks, which again were tiny when I planted them. They were just like a foot high, and they've grown up really very fast into these lovely big drums. I have put lots of topiary birds in because I think birds are a bit agricultural and I love topiary birds. Otherwise, it's pretty simple and agricultural. This is what I grandly call the walled garden, but of course it's not walled at all. There's actually a hedge that runs along that side underneath the pleached hornbeams. When we arrived, there was a huge 1960s extension with big picture windows that totally overlooked and dominated this space. Your eye just went to that, which is the reason why I planted the pleached hornbeams. And I did it round both sides because then it didn't look as though you were deliberately trying to hide something. And instead of doing 1 row, I put in 2. So I've got 2 mini walkways around the edge, and they're sort of arched over with the hornbeam. I planted them again, tiny little plants, 20p a throw, and it really doesn't take long for them to form a big, mature, stilted hedge like this. There was no view out to the end, so I put in the gate. There's no real access there, but it just opens up the views, even if you can't walk out to the fields. When I put in the water, that made a big difference. Not only does it bounce light into the space, but it becomes alive. It's like a magnet for wildlife. The one thing that was here is a beautiful cotinus, and I was going to pull it down because it upset the symmetry of the design. But I'm so glad I didn't. It would have been a dreadful mistake because I quite like the quirkiness of it there and the fact that it performs so well throughout the year, especially in the autumn when it has these wonderful smoky inflorescences. Leading on from the walled garden is the old orchard, which has a more informal feel. Here I've created hazel archways underplanted with woodland planting and the occasional piece of topiary. The meadow of comfrey leads to what used to be the children's garden. A little unkempt now, but my 15-year-old mud hut remains in pristine condition. It's one of my favourite buildings. The working area next door is a powerhouse with 2 homemade greenhouses, pleached apple trees, And then there's the nursery beds for growing on my own propagated plants. But when it comes to edibles, they have a place of their own. This is part of the kitchen garden. This is a major part of my drive for self-sufficiency. It's sited right next to the kitchen, which I think is important, so it's no effort to go out and use all the lovely food that you've got. Then I've got the polytunnel. I did put off getting one for many, many years, but I have to say, although it's been only there for 2 months, it is so productive and it's a really nice environment to work in when it's not so warm. I've got the piggies in the sty, and then I've got the chickens next door to the pigs. The wood I planted when we moved in. We moved in on April 1st, far too late to plant trees. I bought 1,000, about that big, at about 15 pence each, and my husband thought I'd taken the week off work to unpack all the cases. No way, I was busy planting trees. But it makes all the difference. The people who left said that they hated the wind here, but by blocking, well, filtering the southwesterlies with the wood and then the various hedges, it's completely changed the microclimate, and it's a beautiful environment for the pig. I've got the bees and I've got the cattle and the sheep all here as well. All my animals are very easy care animals. So my sheep are Soe sheep, so you don't have to shear them. They self-shed. They're very hardy. They lamb very easily outside with no help from me. Same with the cows. They're very easy, they're very hardy. We've got very poor pasture here, but we don't have to feed them hardly any concentrates as well, because it's all lovely natural herby grassland, which means the meat tastes really delicious. And they're all at very low stocking rates, so it's not stressful in any way for the animal, and they have hopefully a very relaxed, happy life here. This is definitely the part of the garden that we use the most, even though it's north facing. This part of the building is quite low, so it always seems to be in the sun. When we arrived, it was actually part of a field, and there was a barbed wire fence running across the boundary. But there was also a line of telegraph poles that ran across the meadow, and they were redundant, so they were taken down, and I used them to build up the ha-ha, so that we have no boundary between the garden and the meadows. And we enjoy watching the west light coming across the meadow in the evenings, lighting up the sheep and the cattle, which is really better than watching any movie. I hope you've enjoyed having a glimpse at some of my garden, and if you want to see more, go and look at my YouTube channel. And of course, if you want to see lots of other brilliant gardens, go onto the NGS website, and they've got a continuing changing portfolio of wonderful gardens on that.